So let's talk about The Flash then, because I've just come back from seeing that earlier today, and I have thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts. Most of them very, very, very positive. It's been a bit of a divisive film. Some people have been really loving it, some people have been really hating it. A big thing has been people's opinions on the CGI. That's a whole ball game we'll get into. I personally really, really liked the film. That's my opening thoughts going into it. I would give it about an 8 out of 10. It's not the greatest superhero movie I've ever seen, but it's a pretty enjoyable experience that has some good emotional moments, some good fight scenes, and some really cool characters that I like a lot, some of whom were not used enough. You probably know where I'm going with that one. But we need to start off with The Flash. That's where I want to kind of start off with here. And as always, I'm going to do spoiler-free until the end, where maybe I'll do a spoiler section. I'm not even sure if I necessarily need it for this one, but I'll see how I feel by the end of the video if I want to talk about spoilers. But Barry Allen, The Flash, as played by Ezra Miller. I know Ezra is a bit of a troubled person, shall we say, and they've done some rather interesting, to put it mildly, things outside of the movie world. And I don't personally believe there's been enough ramifications for that, just putting that on the record. So that I'm not happy with, but I'm trying to separate that from the film because I don't really feel like there's much that I can say to add to that situation really is necessary here. So I'm aware of all that. I'm not happy with all that, but I'm separating it from the film for this case of talking about The Flash individually. But I have to admit, in terms of acting performance, Ezra did a really good job of making Barry a really compelling lead. Because having only just seen Zack Snyder's Justice League for the first time last week, I was not too sure going into this how well Ezra would do leading a film. I think they did a much better job as a supporting character in Zack Snyder's Justice League, and I wasn't really sure how they'd do on their own, but it was a really compelling performance. I really, really enjoyed it. There's some good humour, there's some good emotion, there's some good kind of ranges of emotions going on with Barry Allen, and that's heightened in particular by having two Barry Allens for the most part of the film, because you have the more mature post-Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League Flash, who's kind of understanding more about what it's like to be a superhero, the pros, the cons, and then you've got the 18-year-old Barry Allen who's still getting to grips with everything, who doesn't know how to use the Flash powers in the same way that the modern Barry does. Just the difference between them I thought was really, really good. It was an interesting portrayal of the different versions of Barry, and I think they were handled very, very well, so I really liked that. The Flash as a superhero has never been one of my favourites, never been one that I've been super interested in. As a kid, I really loved watching Arrow, the CW TV series with Stephen Amell, and when they set up the Flash spin-off show, I liked the Flash when I saw him in Arrow, but I was never compelled to watch the TV show because I just didn't really care about a guy that could run fast. It didn't really hook me as a concept. The idea of a guy in a hood with a bow and arrow killing criminals because there was a list his father gave him, that was compelling. Dude who runs fast, less so. And that was another thing playing against my opinion going into this. But like I said, I think all in all, having seen the whole film, which was a bit of a long film, it was about, 2.5 hours, I think it was very, very well done. I don't think the pacing was particularly bad. I think it was a little bit slower in the second half than the first half. I know there's some people who have said that the first half of the film felt a bit more like it had more heart to it and it kind of lost that in the second half. I don't personally believe that. I think the thing is, what the film's doing plot-wise means that it kind of has to change up halfway through and there are different priorities and different things going on. I don't think it's necessarily a pacing issue or even it losing its heart, but it's just because there are other things the film needs to do to progress, so I don't really see that as a bad thing per se. But the real highlight of the film for me are the characters. So to give you a very brief summary of the plot without spoilers, the idea is that Barry goes back in time to save his mum, because his mum is tragically killed when he's just very, very young, and his dad gets framed for the murder. We know about that from Justice League, and Barry wants to save his mum's life and also in turn get his dad out of prison. In going back and changing time though, as often is with any film where you do this, things go wrong. And can I just say also, in this film, the explanation of how changing the past doesn't just affect your future, it affects everything else, is really, really well explained. Arguably much better than he did in Avengers Endgame. Literally, it's just using two pieces of spaghetti for timelines, and it's saying about how, you change one point and it can change everything before as well as after it. It creates a whole new timeline. You end up in a different universe, basically. And it was really, really well explained, I think, personally. But I love the idea that, we explore, it's not necessarily a new ground we're breaking, but exploring the consequences of changing things in time. Whenever you do that, things don't always go the way you planned. Butterfly effect is never that simple. And I think what they did there was really interesting because Barry was kind of slowly realizing going throughout the film just how much he changed. It wasn't obvious immediately. He got to pick up things as he went along and was like, oh, that's different, you're not who you should be, you're not. And it was just a really interesting concept that I feel personally was executed quite well. And the best two parts of that were, as you might expect, Michael Keaton's Batman and Sasha Calle's Supergirl, because both of those were brilliant. Although I must say, first off, for Sasha, there was nowhere near enough of her. Going into the film, I was like, well, the big things are there's going to be the Flash, there's going to be Batman, there's going to be Supergirl. But Supergirl doesn't show up until well over halfway into the film, and even then, I can't remember whose review it was, but I saw a review saying that she felt more like a plot device than an actual character, and I have to admit, I did feel like that a bit with her. I really, really liked her and thought it was a cool portrayal, and if James Gunn decides to recast her for Supergirl, well, tomorrow, bring her back, sorry, I think that'd be a really good choice. I would love to see Sasha handle Supergirl on a full scale, and I know a lot of people are agreeing on that. It's funny how whenever you watch like particular Marvel films or comic book movies in general, I suppose, even ones that don't get very much respect, there's always like certain things people agree on. Like despite the stuff with Jonathan Majors when Quantum Mania came out, everyone was like, regardless of what you think of the film, Kang was amazing, Jonathan's performance was amazing, and it's kind of like that here, regardless of what you think of The Flash, everyone seems to love Sasha Supergirl, which is really good, because I think she deserves it. I think she did a brilliant job. I just wish there was more of her. But the person who did get more screen time was Michael Keaton's Batman. Now, full transparency here, I have not seen any Michael Keaton Batman films, which is a crime, I'm going to be honest with you. I had fully planned before seeing this film to watch Man of Steel, Zack Snyder's Justice League, and both Michael Keaton Batman films. Didn't get around to that, only managed to watch Zack Snyder's Justice League. I felt like that was the most important one, just to kind of set up the Flash for me. And I don't feel like I missed out on much in the film, having not seen those, and there were Easter eggs and references to the film, and I picked up on a couple of them. But the thing for me that really got me with Michael Keaton's Batman, and it's a weird one, is the Lego Batman game. I grew up playing the Lego games, and Lego Batman in particular was one that I loved. And the main theme they used for that game was the 1989 Tim Burton Danny Elfman theme used for Michael Keaton's Batman. So every single time in the film you either heard the theme or a motif of said theme, I couldn't wipe the grin off my face. I loved him coming back as Batman, and as far as I'm concerned from an outsider's perspective, it feels like he kind of donned the cowl back on pretty well and did a very good job with it. Another thing that I want to point out with this film that I really liked was the lack of a major villain. I really, really loved that, because the only real villains you've got are General Zod, who is coming back from Man of Steel. Again, I've not seen that film, but honestly, as people have said, you don't need to watch Man of Steel to have seen this film, because honestly, he's just there as a figurehead, as a villain, that is just someone there that, you know, kind of is helping Barry deal with the ramifications of him going back in time and changing the universe. Zod's just there as a big threat, because now what Barry's done is potentially doing that universe, and he's got to try and save it. So, that's fine. But beyond that, there's no one else really. There's like someone else that shows up for a tiny bit that's a bit of a threat, but it's not really a major one. Maybe I'll get to that into the spoiler section. But that's the thing. Sometimes if a film doesn't feel like it has a properly established villain, you wonder what the character's got to fight against, fight for. And in this, the film's heart and the character beat and the motivation, the emotions of the characters was more than enough. And that's why I'm kind of singing this film's praise a little bit more, because it feels like it's a very character-driven story, and it handled those elements really, really well. So I'm quite happy about that. Speaking of Batman, actually, let's just talk very briefly about Ben Affleck. I've never been the biggest Batfleck fan. I watched Batman vs Superman and thought he was fine, but I grew up on the Christian Bale movies and really, really liked that Batman, and I've now since seen the Batman with Robert Pattinson, and he's probably my favourite Batman, I'll be honest with you. He's just absolutely phenomenal, and I cannot wait for the second film. But having rewatched Batman vs Superman a couple of times, then seeing Zack Snyder's Justice League more recently, and now this film, he's grown on me a lot, and I love that we got a live-action blue and grey suit. You don't see that suit in live action nearly as much as you should, I personally feel. I know the classic thing is to always go for the black Batman suit, and there's a reason for that. It looks amazing, but he looked good in the blue and grey suit. He did a good job, and I love the kind of Batman set piece we got with him, almost like as a farewell to Batfleck in a way, which was quite cool. Also, very brief cameo from Wonder Woman. I know not everyone's the biggest fan of Gal Gadot's portrayal of her, but I think she's pretty good as Wonder Woman. I've not seen her as much outside of Wonder Woman, and what I've seen her in, I've not been a massive fan of personally, but I like that we got one last stint of her with her Wonder Woman theme, because I don't imagine she's going to be coming back either. I imagine they're probably going to recast Wonder Woman now, but her Wonder Woman theme is probably top 3 superhero themes of all time. Every time I hear that, it's just in my head. It's like brain rot. So I really like hearing that one more time as well. But it did feel like a really, really good closing chapter to that era of DC. It's been a messy one that not everyone's had a very good, consistent opinion of, and it's been a bit kind of all over the place and jumbled, and I can't personally wait to see what James Gunn's got cooking, and if this was how they kind of set up the new universe and carry on from there, I think it was done effectively, and I can understand why Warner Brothers didn't scrap this film after all of Ezra's behaviour, because it is a very good way to set up what James Gunn's going to do, and that's as much as I'm going to say without getting to spoilers. So overall thoughts on The Flash, good film. CGI, I said I was going to touch on it, but I'm honestly not even sure if I want to, because people seem to be really hating on it. I personally didn't have much of a problem with it, and maybe that makes me part of the problem, but I really don't care. There are a couple of shots, especially when Barry's rewinding time, where like you can see different frames of his life around him, and it does look a bit pastely and not quite realistic, but I thought that was an artistic choice, and also the makers of the film have said that too, so whether that's them trying to get out of it and it wasn't an artistic choice, I don't know. But I personally didn't see any CGI in this that made me go, ugh. So I think they did the floating head better than they did in Thor: Love and Thunder's original cut, I'll say that much, but that's beside the point. So yeah, that's all my thoughts overall on The Flash. Let's talk very briefly about spoilers, and let's just say right out the bat, I was not expecting to see Supergirl and Michael Keaton's Batman both die repeatedly. That was a bit shocking. That kind of caught me off guard. But it plays into the larger thing that I liked about this film about, again, even though it's not an original concept, showing you the consequences of changing timelines. Sometimes you can't just fix everything to amend what you've done. You know, you can't just go, I've created a universe, let's save it, and then everyone will be happy. Well, that universe, no, it's doomed. You've created a universe or found yourself in a universe by making that choice that can never be saved. There's no way to save Supergirl. There's no way to save Michael Keaton's Batman. And I really liked his second death, the kind of you already saved me thing. That was a nice moment. And it was also with Sasha Calle, Supergirl, where I felt like we didn't get enough of her because she was too busy dying for the last section of her appearance. So, a bit weird. But that introduced the arrival of Dark Flash, which I don't know if that's a big thing in the comics. I know that this film is kind of an adaptation of Flashpoint and a more kind of grounded family version of it. But I don't really feel like Dark Flash did much. I like the idea that he kind of appeared early in the film to punch Barry out of his time rewinding and set him up on the path was a bit strange and not really very well delivered upon, I don't think, personally. But I don't really mind it beyond that. I think it's an interesting concept that the Barry that was obnoxious and annoying ends up being the one who's determined to save the universe, even if it's not going to work out, and becomes this Dark Flash. It was fine, it was passable, but that's like the other villain that I don't really count and why I'm not really that bothered. Like, I don't feel like the film needed many kind of major villains for it to work. Also, just to talk very briefly about the universe reset, that's the other big spoiler thing that I want to talk about before I look at the conclusion of the film. I just like the way it was set up. I like the way that, you know, Barry didn't put everything back to normal. He did change it slightly by getting his dad out of prison, even if he couldn't bring his mum back to life. And I did think, looking at that, I was like, hang on, we know that his dad didn't look at the camera and you've changed that, so surely that's still going to have ramifications. You know, he didn't actually interact with his mum when he changed timelines. He just put a can of tomatoes in there and look what that did, bringing a Supergirl fighting Zod and dying repeatedly. So I knew something was going to go wrong. And then when he called Batman, and there was kind of a bit of a mystery as to who was pulling up, I was like, oh, so it's going to be Michael Keaton again? And then I was thrown for six seeing George Clooney. I was thinking, I almost half forgot he was Batman, to be honest. I feel like most of the universe did from Batman and Robin, which I also haven't seen. That was an interesting twist. Does that mean we're going to have George Clooney coming back as Batman for Brave and the Bold? James Gunn did say that his next take with Batman was going to be an older one training up Damian Wayne, so maybe? But I just love that we are basically in a universe that isn't completely different. There's still an Iris West that knows Barry a little bit, wants to date him. We've still got Barry's dad getting out of prison. We've still got Aquaman, which of course needed to be there because Aquaman 2 still to come. But it means that now you can have a bit of narrative play around, and James Gunn can decide what to keep from the previous DC universe and what not to, and just cite it as, this still happened in this universe, this didn't. So his Suicide Squad could have still happened in his new universe, but the old one might not have done, and so on and so forth. It allows you that narrative freedom, which I really, really like, because the conversation between Barry and Aquaman at the end, in the end credits scene, was just based on them. There wasn't much of an acknowledgement outside of things other than there being multiple Batmen. So I like that we've kind of left the door open there and kind of given an effective universe reset. It's a really good way to do it. I was worried it'd be a bit too in your face, but it was really perfectly done because not every question is answered, and that's good because it gives James that writing flexibility to make everything work around it, which is greatly appreciated. That's all my thoughts on The Flash. I honestly, like I said, thought it was a really good film. I don't have too much to criticize about it. Is it the greatest superhero film of all time, like some people were saying? No. But I really, really liked it. And I just hadn't mentioned, but it's a film about family. It's a film about characters, emotion, family, and I also found myself shedding a tear a little bit at the end with his mum. The last scene he had there, I thought that was beautiful. As just someone who's grown up living with just my mum, I feel like that's like a little bit of a relatable thing. But from an emotional, character-driven standpoint, it's one of the better superhero films that have come out in recent memory. I really liked it. I'm keen to watch it again at some point. Not before I watch Across the Spider-Verse again, though, because I'm desperate to watch that film. And maybe make a video on here too. But there you go. Those are my thoughts on The Flash. Thank you all very much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, feel free to give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you thought of the film in the comment section down below. And if you're new around here and you want to see more of my opinions on things, click that subscribe button. Beware though, most things are often optimistic. I'm not someone who likes to get very pessimistic here on YouTube, even though that's normally what people tend to like to watch. But either way, thank you all for watching. I'll see you all very soon with a brand new video. Until then, my name is Troy, and these were my thoughts.